This happened a long time ago. My girlfriend disappeared. We were at the drive-in movieplex in my hometown. Her name was Ginny, and she was beautiful. I tried to get us in the front row that night. I specifically remember that, but we didn't get there in time. The place had opened only a year before, and it was a popular place to be on a Saturday night. I think the movie playing was House on Haunted Hill, if memory serves me. We both enjoyed the horror genre of movies, and we were very excited to watch this one. At some point during the movie, I had to use the men's room, so I left her there in my car and walked past all the cars to the fuel station next door. Afterwards, I returned to the car and saw that Ginny was gone, and another girl had taken her place. I laughed at first. I thought they were playing a joke on me. I asked her if she was Ginny's friend, and she told me no, that she didn't know who I was referring to. The joke didn't keep me laughing long, and I told her I wanted her to tell me where Ginny was right away. All she did was smile at me, thinking this was a big laugh. I demanded she exit my vehicle and demanded to know where Ginny had gone. The mysterious girl climbed out of my car, and before walking away from me, she said, "She's gone." I looked all around, walked from car to car asking if anyone knew Ginny or had seen her go, but nobody saw nothing. I never saw Ginny again, and I never saw the other girl either. My daughter tells me she had learned that she is still missing from my hometown. Nobody has ever seen her.
This happened to me and my family 2 years ago, but it still scares me to this day whenever the idea of seeing a drive-in movie is brought up. My wife and I went to see Crimson Peak since it was such an anticipated movie. We couldn't find a babysitter for our 2-year-old son, but we were dying to see this movie. So we decided to go to a midnight showing and bring him with us since he'd most likely be asleep through the whole movie anyway. We ended up arriving to the drive-ins just as the movie playing before it was ending, which was perfect because all the cars were clearing out and it gave us the freedom to park wherever we wanted. We parked right in the middle of the lot. About 5 minutes before the movie started, a ton of cars pulled in and filled the parking lot. I assumed that since it was a late showing that there would hardly be any cars there, but I didn't take into consideration that it was a Tuesday night and all movies are half price. But we didn't mind too much since we had such a great spot. Then the movie started. About an hour into the movie, my wife had to use the restroom. And normally, I'd escort her to the restroom since it's kind of a far walk. But this time I had to stay at the car because our son was asleep in his car seat in the back seat. About 10 minutes later, my wife returned to our car, but was completely scared. I asked her what was wrong, and she said that when she was coming back from the restroom, a man cut her off and got in her face and started yelling a bunch of weird things at her, and that he seemed like a homeless guy, but had something mentally wrong with him, and that he stunk worse than anything she's ever smelled. I tried to calm her down and told her we could leave, but she said no, let's just finish the movie since we hadn't had a date night in so long and we were completely blocked in by all the cars that pulled in after us anyways. About 15 minutes after we started watching the movie again, we heard tapping on the side of our car, like fingers tapping. By this time even I was getting scared. I looked around, through the windows, and didn't see anything. I slowly turned back to the movie screen, and I tried to pretend like I wasn't scared. Then, not even 30 seconds later, we heard it again. This time, I got out of the car to look. I walked around the whole car, but again, saw nothing. My heart was racing, and my stomach was very uneasy. Again, I turned back to the movie. The next thing I heard still rings in my ears. My wife let out the most shrill scream I've ever heard and was staring towards the back of our car. The man she had ran into earlier was hunched over our car and staring at our son through the back window. I opened my door to jump out at him, but he had ran at full speed away from our car and into the dark of the night. We frantically left and never went to the drive-ins again.
My girl and I frequent the drive-in theater all the time in the summer. I'm not sure if it's different anywhere else, but at the drive-ins closest to us, there's 2 movies that play on a single screen back to back. It's also pretty cheap, so it's an awesome choice for a hot summer night. We were doing our normal thing. We went to the store to get some candy and beer and stuff before heading to the drive-ins to save some money. I'm sure you know the food at the theater is ridiculously overpriced. We made it there about 30 minutes before the first feature started, and people were still showing up and positioning their vehicles. We got to the front row with nobody in front of us, which somehow I always managed to get. After 30 minutes of waiting and munching on junk food, the previews started for the first movie. Everything was completely normal up until this point, and during the previews, I heard a noise outside. It sounded like someone had kicked a rock at my truck. Not a lot. It just sounded like one good-sized rock hit my tailgate or something. We thought nothing of it because of our focus on the screen. An hour or so went by, with no other unusual sounds, and we were enjoying the movie, when suddenly we both heard something strange. It sounded like somebody was walking right next to my truck and dragging their feet heavily. We looked around, but saw nothing. As I was looking around, I spotted a girl in the passenger seat in the car next to us looking at me. She had a concerned look on her face and motioned for me to roll down my window. I did, and she immediately said, "There is somebody under your truck." This made me feel sick. I knew she wasn't messing with me and didn't know what to say back or what to do. My girl started to quietly freak out, and I asked the girl next to us as quietly as I could what the person was doing, and she said back, "I don't know." I was afraid to get out, and I remembered that eerie feeling that I had when I was a kid, and I didn't want to step off my bed at night for fear of somebody underneath. Same feeling. I decided to call the drive-in's number listed online and told them what was happening. After asking the details of my truck, they said they'd send somebody over to us. Before anyone came, we very suddenly heard more noise under us, and then a girl, wearing a dress, crawled out from under my truck right in front of us and began walking backwards towards the movie screen while looking into the truck. When she got to the screen, she turned and walked away towards the fence that separated our lot from the one next to us. A few minutes later, a man approached my window, and I told him that she had walked away. Nothing else happened. It was so bizarre.
The drive-ins have always been my favorite pastime, for as long as I can remember. The drive-in movies were where my parents always took me and my siblings on the weekend. Many memories of buttery popcorn, carbonated sodas, and chewy candy. All great memories. Except one terrifying memory that's burned into my mind. When I was a teenager, I had to get my wisdom teeth pulled. My cheeks got swollen and wide. When I got home from my dentist appointment, I was greeted by my older brother who was making fun of my cheeks by calling me chipmunk-related names. It honestly really hurt my feelings, and my mom noticed that. So being the loving mother that she was, she offered to take me to the drive-ins to cheer me up, just me and her. She was a stay-at-home mom, and I was allowed to stay home from school the next day due to the teeth pulling. So we were going to see a double feature and stay out really late. We got to the drive-ins, parked our car, and got ready to watch the movie. When the first movie ended, I had to go to the restroom, and my mom wanted to go to the concession stand to get some popcorn. When I was done going to the bathroom, I joined my mom as she was getting the bucket of popcorn handed to her. We started walking back to the car. When we arrived, we noticed a car had parked behind us. This car was a black Honda. It was an old beat-up car, and I noticed that the driver's side headlight was broken out. We got back into our car. Then shortly after, the second movie began. About a quarter way through the movie, the car behind us, for some reason, turned its right turn signal on. I figured whoever it was must have done it by mistake and would notice it and turn it off. But the light just kept flickering on and off for about 5 minutes. It was starting to irritate me since I was on the passenger side and the light kept blinking in my side mirror. I mentioned it to my mom, and she said she'll go to tell them to turn it off. My mom got back in the car a minute later and was red in the face, and her eyebrows were curled in towards her nose. She said that when she knocked on the window, a guy who looked like he was on drugs rolled the window down and told her to mind her own damn business and get back to the car. My mom was a Christian woman, so that really upset her. For the rest of the movie, my mom wasn't even paying attention, and honestly, neither could I. We were both just mad at the guy behind us. Once the movie ended, we started to drive home. Halfway home, I looked in the mirror and noticed something that made my stomach hurt. There was a black car behind us, and it only had one headlight. I told my mom what I saw, and she said she saw it too. We took a few different turns to get home than we normally do, and this black car took every turn we took. My mother and I started trembling. I didn't even have a cell phone yet because I was still a young teenager, and my mom's cell phone had died in the middle of the first movie, so we couldn't call the police. We were almost home now, and he was still behind us. We didn't want him to know where we lived, so we just kept driving around our neighborhood, trying to lose him. We even drove past our house to make it look like we didn't live on that street. After a few more turns, the car finally turned in a different direction. So we rushed home, pulled in the driveway, and ran into the house. My mom woke my dad to tell him what had happened. We all looked out of the window to make sure he didn't follow us. After 10 minutes or so, we sighed and finally felt safe enough to go to our rooms. We went upstairs. I turned to the right to go to my room, and my mom and dad turned to the left towards theirs. I fell asleep in my clothes on the bed. After an hour of sleeping, I woke up because I heard the sound of a car door shutting. I looked outside my window and saw out on the street. The black car was parked in front of my house. My heart started beating so hard, and I got out of bed to go to my mom's room to wake her to call the police. As I was walking down the hallway, I passed the stairs and saw at the bottom was the man from the car standing in the shadows looking up at me. I froze in fear while I stared back down at him. Then I ran to my parents' room and slammed the door behind me, locked it, and screamed, "He's in the house! Call the police!" My dad grabbed the phone, and within 5 minutes the police arrived. But the guy was long gone. We filled out a police report, and then the cops left. The next day, we got a call from the sheriff that they found the guy about an hour later and arrested him. But what chilled my bones was that the sheriff told us that when they found him, he had a long butcher knife on him.
I took my family to the drive-ins about 5 years ago, and something straight up creepy happened. The drive-ins have been a favorite spot of mine since I was a boy, and I always went to the same one. Nothing scary or even weird had ever happened. It was Friday night, and we had taken our 3 young girls to see Despicable Me. We waited in the usual long-ass line of cars to get in. As soon as the car was parked, I went to get popcorn, candy, and soda for everyone. At some point in the middle of the movie, all 5 of us heard hysterical laughter coming from nearby, but we couldn't tell from which car. We actually all began laughing at first because of how random, how loud, and how hard this person was laughing. It sounded like a woman. After a few minutes of sharing a great laugh with my girls, my wife and I began to get annoyed. Our girls would not stop laughing along with whoever it was, and we had had enough. We told them to quiet down and try to focus on the movie. They did, but the laughing continued from somewhere outside. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore and got out, in an attempt to tell the person cracking up to quiet down as well. To my surprise, I wasn't the only person outside looking for the source of the laughter. All around me were men and women looking around. I had realized that these people had been looking for a while now, and couldn't find who it was. A guy made eye contact with me and had a look of bewilderment on his face. After a minute, myself and 2 others found the source of the laughing. It was the woods in the corner of the parking lot we were in. The laughter had been coming from somewhere in the trees, and when we realized where it was coming from, the laughter increased to a very loud, almost cackle. Whoever it was watching us. None of us had the balls to go confront whoever was doing this, and we instead walked over to the office to complain. I walked back to my car, and the laughter continued for a long time, before finally, abruptly stopping.